The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's Westminster City Council study session and WEEDA Board of Directors. Our first item on the agenda tonight is our WEEDA study session. I will ask the city clerk to take the roll, and we will be answering as the WEEDA Board of Directors. Ms. Parker?
Chairperson Atchison.
Here.
Board Member DeMott.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Seitz.
Here.
Board Member Seymour.
Here.
Board Member Scully.
Here.
Board Member Smith.
Present.
And Board Member Bowles.
Here.
All right, thank you, everyone. Tonight, we have a presentation related to our downtown team structure and the progress to date by the staff, and part of us, the staff presentation will also include our consulting team. Mr. Tripp, who's going to lead this?
Deputy Andrews, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the board. Very brief introduction by me tonight, Jody Andrews, Deputy City Manager. I'm going to ask very soon John Burke to come forward. He's with our Economic Development Department. He'll introduce the subject tonight and prepare you for the presentation. I would like to just remind everybody that tonight is a response to a request from the board to bring back our downtown consultant team, and also to provide at the same time an update on the downtown progress and also next steps moving forward. So that's exactly what we're hoping to do tonight. We are very open and available for questions through the presentation. Please don't hold back on those. It's intended to be an informative session, and also to reintroduce you to the consultant team tonight. So if I could just ask John Burke to join me here and take over from this point. Thank you, John.
Okay, my pleasure, Jody. Thank you very much. So yes, tonight we'd like to share how we've been able to structure a team to achieve the current results, as well as look forward to what's next in downtown Westminster. With 2.5 full-time employees dedicated to advancing the city's vision for downtown Westminster, we collaboratively work with every city department through weekly coordination meetings that include the city manager's office, city attorney's office, finance, community development, public works and utilities, fire department, and parks, recreation, libraries, to make sure every project is carried through from concept through construction to certificate of occupancy. So our team manages consultant contracts, the downtown capital improvement program accounts. We maintain the downtown specific plan and update it as needed. Help negotiate and track the various development agreements, parking agreements, leases, etc. We lead the administrative processes needed for every property closing. We also work to implement strategies which include the general improvement district, signage and wayfinding, operation maintenance, the future entertainment district, and the cost benefit analysis for the future commuter rail extension, just to name a few. In simple terms, our team becomes the first and last point of contact for development partners as they navigate through the city's review process. We quickly direct them to the expertise within each city department to move the downtown vision forward. In addition to this, staff rely heavily on the expertise of the outside consultants that have joined us here tonight. So now I'd like to introduce you to our consulting team that help attract developers to downtown and assist with negotiations and land transactions. You probably already know them, but I'd like to read a brief intro for each one of them to help you get to know them better. So the first, and as I do this, feel free to turn your cameras on because I'm going to turn mine off in a second. The first is Mary Beth Jenkins, the president of Laramie Company. Mary Beth is president and founder of the Laramie Company, providing both commercial real estate consulting and brokerage services for over 30 years. Mary Beth has been working with the city of Westminster since 1995 on redevelopment efforts such as the Promenade and the Orchard Town Center. Her company has become a trusted advisor for the city. And as part of the Downtown Westminster team, Mary Beth interfaces with staff on project development strategy, identifying and vetting qualified developers, retail consulting, and the brokerage of land sales. So that's Mary Beth. Next, I'm going to introduce you to our outside legal counsel, Malcolm Murray. Mr. Murray's practice has emphasized land use planning, zoning, eminent domain, and urban renewal law, including extensive litigation experience. He has represented both governmental and private clients in eminent domain actions, as well as acting as general counsel and special counsel to several urban renewal authorities. He provides special counsel for Steamboat Springs and Trinidad. And it's noteworthy that Malcolm has been doing urban renewal for Westminster since 1995, bringing many urban renewal projects, including Walnut Creek and the Orchard Town Center, to completion. Thank you, Malcolm. Next is our economic expert, John Mullins. John Mullins brings over 40 years of public and private finance experience to the team. Direct responsibilities include analyzing the economics of each development project and providing input on property and sales tax projections for the project. John has been involved with the City of Westminster in this capacity for both the Orchard Town Center and the Downtown Westminster project. And also part of our team with the City of Westminster is Mona Shuri. Mona, if you mind turning your camera on as well. Mona's been with the city for 15 years and basically handles everything from the closings of these projects to managing all the development agreements and basically anything you need in downtown Westminster from an economic development side of things. She's the point person for the city in all of that capacity. Thank you, Mona. And lastly, our retail guru, Greg Stoffel. Greg Stoffel is a principal of Greg Stoffel Associates. Greg has over 35 years experience in retail, commercial, shopping center, entertainment, and leisure-oriented projects. He has a broad range of expertise in strategic market planning, market research, project concept, and feasibility. Greg has completed assignments for major shopping center developers and for entertainment companies such as Walt Disney, Imagineering, and Universal Studios. Example projects include the Irvine Spectrum Center, Fashion Island Newport Beach, and a variety of quality retail, dining, and entertainment centers throughout the U.S. So now, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth as in Greg Stoffel. The two of them will carry the next few slides. And again, our team will stick around afterwards for questions as well. So Mary Beth, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, John, and good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and the WEEDA board. I really look forward to the day when we can see you in person, but for now, it's nice to see everybody's Zoom face. So as John had talked about, we've been working on the site for quite a while. Our firm really started with the land assemblage and choosing the master developer. And it really became apparent through the RFP process for that master developer that one developer couldn't really handle the different types of development that were being required on this site. And so the city choosing to become the master developer wasn't an easy decision, but it's the right decision, and I think you'll see why. We've brought in a variety of qualified developers in each of their areas, and thus their focus is on their expertise with their architects, their lenders, and they haven't bitten off more than they can chew. It's taken a lot of time and focus. The staff is amazing. Our consultants were truly a team that really works daily on this project. One of my responsibilities, as you all know, besides the development curation and what comes next, is really the retail tenant mix. And this is where Greg has been an immeasurable help. We not only I proactively target really these key retail tenants that match up with the vision that you all have talked about, but it's explaining this development to them when there was nothing out there. And really to handle this, Greg has put together amazing I'd say data. Data is what got us the Orchard Town Center and the anchors that were there. It was Greg's report truly that made the difference. And in our instance, when we target the tattered cover bookstore or a very special tenant, they want to understand why this site, a former regional mall site, is the right site for them, especially with this mixed use program that we have. And once Greg helps us educate those folks, it's exciting to see them buy into it. The other thing Greg does is he and I put together what's called a use matrix. So the tricky thing here is when you have one developer, they put a mix of tenants together and they decide who's going to go where. when you have 6 different developers on 6 different blocks, you have to handle that delicately. But the way that we've actually done this, and Greg has done this in other cities, is really put together for each blocks a use plan, which is acceptable and unacceptable uses. We don't dictate who the tenants are. We say, this is the best use for this block. And they can just be dining, for instance. But the other thing it does is we try and really work with duplication. You know, the last thing we need is 5 coffee shops on 5 corners, which is the easiest thing for everybody to do. And as you all know, we have this wonderful coffee shop that, just to tell a quick story, they've been working, they believed in this site in 2018. That's almost 3 years ago. And that's, as you all may know, the owner was one of the head folks at the Westin Hotel and then started his own company. There are a lot of folks within Westminster that really understand this project and that are amazing to step forward. So really what you're going to hear from Greg is how he looks at this site, what the demographics are, not only for retail, but he's also going to touch on just the developments that we have in play. And lastly, I would like to just really happy to announce that we have just signed our market hall operator. And as you all know, the Aspire has a 12,000 square foot market hall. It is Mark Shaker, who is the operator for the Stanley Marketplace. He also just opened the Golden Mill, and he has survived COVID. He stayed with us through COVID, and you will be hearing more about him at city council meetings, but where you are really the first to know outside the developer and Mark Shaker. So thought that would be really a fun thing to tell you all about tonight. But anyway, I'd like to now just turn it over to Greg Stoffel, who will present his portion of this presentation that really talks about the data. And again, Greg works on national projects, so he will also give you a sense of what this project is like versus the national projects that he works on. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary Beth. Good evening, folks. My name is Greg Stoffel. I've been consulting on any variety of retail dining and/or entertainment projects for over 30 years. I've worked on the retail plans for about a little over 90 master plan communities, cities, and towns, over 400 individual projects. I've worked on projects throughout the state of Colorado, from Puebla on the south to Fort Collins on the north, and we've been out in the mountain communities as well. I began working for the city with the city of Westminster in 2005, trying to prove whether the Orchard Town Center site would actually be able to handle retail or not. And obviously, we came up with a program that proved that the site would hold retail. And then after that, I was subsequently brought in the early stages to help look at the potential and what the opportunity was for the downtown site. So from a historical perspective, and I appeared before the city council in a work session maybe 5 years ago, and I mentioned the same first bullet, but I think it's important for you to always keep in mind that this site at one time supported a 1.5 million square foot mall at decent sales levels, pretty good sales levels. So the fact that the owner let the center be compromised by Flatiron really says nothing about the viability of the site itself. So the city purchased the property in 2011. At that time, when we were looking at it, there were a variety of different options for the site. It could have easily, at the time, become a large big box center with national tenants, but the competition for that category was very, very fierce. And then ultimately, the city's vision really for a downtown that had a roster of mostly, local and smaller retail and dining tenants really was the better solution for the property. Next slide. So where are we at today? You have 1,130 dwelling units built or either under construction. We have 386 units occupied. We'll talk about that in a little bit. You have 34 townhomes opening next year. You have 97,000 feet of retail including the hotel restaurant. It's right around 43% leased. You have addition 220,000 square feet of office estimated to come online in 2024, and another 400,000 square feet estimated by 2026. The Origin Hotel is really also just a really quality addition to the site. And what you have really are the beginnings of a rich, vibrant, mixed-use community. Next slide. So how did we get to this point today? So let's just talk about market support, because it's always one that we keep coming back to in any discussions with potential developers or tenants. So the population levels are very strong for Westminster. We have 565,000 residents within 7 miles. Since we last looked at this area in 2015, we've had almost a 6% growth. We've identified a very conservative primary trade area, and that would be the area from which 2/3 or 70% of the total sales would come from. We've identified this conservative trade area, and it holds almost 500,000 residents. What's very important for the site is that with the opening of your first apartment complex, we have a growing on-site population that is younger and almost as affluent as the city of Westminster average. So the average age for the Ascent is 29 versus 39 for the city, and the average household income is over 100,000. In our communications with potential developers and retailers, it's always insightful to compare the site to other regional centers, not only in the Denver area, but throughout the state of. And so, the downtown Westminster really compares well. So the primary trade area, average household income is 100,000. That's a 35% increase since we looked at it in 2015. And compared to other centers in Colorado, the actual number of households earning 75,000 or more and 100,000 or more compares very well with an awful lot of centers, most of which you've heard. I'm sure all of which you've heard of. Another key factor, particularly for dining, is that local employment is very strong. We have over 116,000 workers, working within a 12-minute drive time, which is a very, very strong level. We also know via the newer technology that we didn't have a few years ago that the existing uses within and adjacent to downtown Westminster are currently drawing customers from a larger than typical trade area. And I'll show you a heat map in the next slide. And it's also important to keep in mind or to understand that the centers immediately adjacent to downtown Westminster are generating more than $270 million in annual taxable sales. Now, almost all of this is from traditional national retailers, but the key point is that they've legitimized the downtown Westminster site as a viable retail location. Next slide. This is a heat map of the JCPenney traders. So what this represents is anybody who's been inside JCPenney for the last 6 months and had a location-enabled app on their smart device. It shows up in the cellular data, and so we can look at where do people live. So this represents where the cellular devices rest at night, and we can infer from that this represents where people live. Discounting a little bit for hotels and stuff, but still you can see the red areas on the heat map show the areas of highest customer patronage. But what's important to really look at when you look at this map, you realize that we're drawing customers up to almost Orchard Town Center. We're drawing customers from out near Arvada and over in Thornton, and we're drawing customers south of I-70. If I pan this aerial out, you would see customers from an even broader area than we're showing right here. That we did the same maps for Lowe's, for Costco, and for Olive Garden, and all of the trade areas. Got to mention Olive Garden. All the trade areas are equally as big, if not bigger. Next slide, please. So things have changed since we looked at this a few years ago, but we're all aware that retail continues to change. What's really changed, and particularly within this last year, this more difficult year, is that customers are patronizing districts and centers in new and increasingly different ways. The pandemic has really accelerated and contributed to this change. And when I look at it, if I look at some of the heat maps that I've seen and how far people come, what really occurs to me is that the COVID gave downtown a chance to catch up to the market. If we had opened a lot of these establishments, a year ago, we would be talking about how do we provide relief to some of these people. So the fact that it was delayed is unfortunate. The fact that the pandemic, took something out of us was unfortunate. But hey, we're in a good place right now. So also, it's important from my perspective, looking at a variety of projects that I've worked on. The city's vision for downtown was really ahead of the curve. At the time, it was really viewed as something that had to be done. We thought it was the correct path. And now that it's come on, now that you've had developers start bringing stuff out of the ground, people are looking at this, and they're really looking at this type of a model as the preferred solution for older, tired malls. And so, the fact that you're kind of leading the way to a certain degree is very notable. Not every city has the wherewithal to take on the master developer role. You guys have been blessed with staff that has seen the big picture. You could have easily gone to a master developer for the site, but you would end up with, the end product wouldn't be anywhere close to what you have the potential to be. So your initial investment of $100 million has created so far at least $450 million in investments on the site so far, and obviously that keeps growing. And more importantly, you're spreading the risk of this development amongst your development partners who bought into the original vision that this would be a really good mixed-use project. So they shared in your vision. That's important to remember. Next slide, please. If we look at, what are downsides, or, let's get real, holding to the vision of where you want to go with downtown, it's really not easy, but it's necessary. So we have individual developers and tenants don't always share the big picture, the long-term vision. There's different financial difficulties or considerations that a developer might have on a site that causes them to look at, well, we need this use, or we have other things besides retail and dining that we need to focus in on. Mary Beth alluded to the fact that it's one thing that one problem we've run into, not just on this project, but other projects I've worked on, is that when you have multiple developers, it's very possible without controls, you end up with 4 coffee shops on one corner. That is not where we need to be, particularly early on when retail space is at a premium, so to speak. So there's this inevitable friction between the short-term goals of the developers in the city and the long-term vision. So we could have attracted several national tenants early on to downtown, but the shift that the city made from trying to attract national tenants to local and regional retailers on the ground floor space of these mixed-use buildings, even though it caused leasing problems, just trying to educate, as Mary Beth said, educate people. It really is the right direction to go. I won't mention names of centers, but there are there are examples of other centers in the Denver metro area that really put an emphasis on national tenants early on. And the end result is that they end up looking like, same old, same old. When I walk into one, I have to really look at the sign to see which one I'm in, because they tend to feel the same, maybe not look the same. So one thing that we've done from the very beginning is with Mary Beth, we created an acceptable use matrix that block by block provides some direction and tenant mix parameters for the developers. And that's really important. We talked about the duplication. It's important at almost all costs to avoid duplication in the beginning, because it would be confusing to the customers that we need that come in to patronize these all these new places. Next slide, please. So it's no secret for a lot of centers. For years, we've looked at a variety of larger centers and mixed-use districts and been able to, we've done in the past, before we had mobile data, we did exit surveys and phone surveys on the street to find out where people come from and why they came, more importantly, why they came, how much money they spend. But as in, many of today's newer centers and districts, dining is one of the key anchors. So when I show you, if we did a heat map, for example, that heat map that I showed you, if everybody that comes into a regional district for the purpose of dining, that trade area is typically larger than any of the single anchors you might have, that district might have. So dining is a key anchor. The specialty retail that we would like, that we will have at some point on the site, will follow once the site is proven to attract more leisurely visits to it. So the tenants that we have so far were attracted to the vision of downtown, in spite of the fact that the project was new. I mean, the one thing it's hard, almost impossible to do, is to get retail tenants to pioneer a site. We weren't exactly pioneering, but to get some of the tenants that you do have is really a testament to the effort so far. So we've always say retail follows rooftops. This is very important and steadfast for downtown Westminster. But the fact that you have uses like Alamo Draft House, you have Tattered Cover, you just signed the Market Hall. We had Penny's on the site. You have Famille coming in. We have Captain Burger. We have Sweet Bloom Coffee Roasters, a Cup Tattered Cover. That's a heck of a beginning. I mean, I can't underestimate that, or I can't tell you how important that is. You've done very well so far. Next slide. So where do we go? Where do we go? So for the next several years, we're encouraging more housing on the site. The housing developments create additional retail, dining, and services spaces that we need to create a critical mass of quality uses. We need to increase the number of local serving goods, dining goods and services, so that the site becomes more popular for residential developers and for office developers. So the more desirable we can make it with local amenities, the more that the housing developers will benefit from that. When I look at it, I think the current and planned densities that you have are very appropriate. We keep in mind that a lot of the developers so far have bought into the vision of downtown. If we were at all considering reducing densities, I think that would be not a good thing, because we have developers who bought into the vision. Continued office development will be the icing on the cake. That's going to provide the daytime activity that we need, that will serve to strengthen all the uses, not just dining, but the specialty retail that we're going to be getting. And it's important, as each deal comes online, that the developers understand that opening the retail tenants is a priority, because the quicker we can get the retail and the dining and the services online, then again, it's just like I was saying before, the more desirable the site is for potential residents and employees. So I'd like to see you continue to seed the site over time with unique and successful retail tenants and venues that will further your goals to attract additional investment, additional retailers, additional developers. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and I think we're open for questions.
A question from the council, if anyone? Greg, going back to your comment about housing, when you said to continue to add housing, are you talking about over and above what we've already committed to? Seeing that there's still a lot of that hasn't even started to come out of the ground yet.
Honestly, I mean, my personal opinion is I would like to see more housing than you've entitled, but I would definitely like to see what you've entitled come out of the ground. So as you continue to do deals for residential, I just would encourage as much as you can, and then office will come in at the pace that office development comes in, which is usually never in the forefront.
Okay. Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You hit on that from an initial standpoint, but is there a optimum number of primary residents that we should look at?
Well, what you've entitled is a pretty good base. The site will really start humming when you're about a third, when about a third of the residents are occupied, of the total build out are occupied. So we're not there yet, but the residents that you are getting early on are creating a really, really good potential vibe for downtown. Ultimately, when the project reaches 75% absorption of the residential, you're going to have a very thriving district that's rich, feels good, it's current. It's going to feel very good, and it's going to stand out.
And is there a follow-up on that? Is there a way to optimize that between owned units and rented units?
Well, my personal opinion and professional opinion is that you should veer on projects that are closest to the core of your downtown, more to rental properties, because when you're putting for sale adjacent to potential entertainment zones on top of restaurants, etc., you'd like to get the for sale out at the periphery, but keep the apartments more towards the core.
Thank you. No other questions.
Mr. Voles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Councilor Seymour just asked my question, which was owner occupied versus rentals. So good question, Councilor. I'm good. Thank you.
Right. Vice Chair Sykes.
Did Mary Beth want to chime in on that as well?
I think she can leave you out on a limb by yourself, Greg. Vice Chair Sykes.
Thank you, Chair. So I have just a quick question about phasing of parking. We have seen a lot of success at our downtown, and it is exciting to drive by. When I'm going to Costco, I'll just drive through. And actually, I got a tour, an impromptu tour of the Origins by just like hearing in a window and someone saw me. So it is exciting, but I have to ask, with our success, have we started contemplating when we're going to need to address like at least surface parking adjacent to the Origin? Can someone remind me, is that something that this is an appropriate question? Because what we don't want to do is struggle from our success, right? That we get to a point where parking becomes an issue, and then, and it impacts the I guess, convenience of the downtown or experience.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that, Vice Chair Sykes. No, very good question. So we do have a few surface lots that are currently out there, and we're actually going to be resurfacing the one that's west of JCPenney, the one that's south of the hotel as well, and we also have one north of the Olive Garden. Those will maintain again as an asset to the city. We'll use for more short-term parking in the same way that we allow 4 hours free parking, but it provides for that overflow until those parcels get developed. We also currently have a plan to build a parking structure behind the Alamo Draft House. And that would be a project that would be coupled with a condominium type project where it'd be a shared parking facility, similar to what we did with the Eaton Street project with the affordable housing. So there's a lot of value add in cost sharing and kind of a public-private partnership or joint venture from that perspective. And so that is absolutely part of the plan. Our current parking lease with the Origin Hotel allows them to use valet parking in our A3 lot, or that's the one that's already been out there for a few years now that's north of Alamo, as well as the parking lots that's just south of the hotel. So we're going to resurface those, make them ADA accessible, provide some solar lighting. Again, knowing that that's going to be a future very valuable parcel for the city, particularly as it relates to any sort of commuter rail extension. And so we're going to resurface that, but know full well that at some point in time, that will be a very strong office play for downtown Westminster.
All right. Well, thank you for the presentation, and I'm delighted to hear about the market hall. Stanley Lake Marketplace is obviously, buzzing and something everyone knows about and enjoys. I'm so excited to have the same brain behind that coming to Westminster. That's good news. And I'm just, it's when we decided to go to the block by block approach, it's because we believed in the vision, and we had heard from the community that they believed in the vision, and we weren't able to get there with a master developer. And it's really affirming to see those seeds sprouting now. So thanks for everybody's work.
Mr. Demott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a couple of things that I would like to ask. You had touched on some of the different projects you had worked on for the city prior, such as the orchards. So one thing that I'm curious with the trends that we've seen at the orchard, where we've really lost a lot of retail or switched retail to a lot more restaurant. Do we see that as a trend that we think might impact the downtown at all?
Are you asking, would Orchard impact downtown?
No, I'm asking, we've seen trends at the orchard where we've seen some of that retail switch to more like experience dining and things like that. And I know that that's caused impact on some difference in the way we plan out utilities. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, since you were part of that project and we've seen some shift in the market that has impacted the orchard. And as we go through continuing to build out the downtown, how do we keep that in mind? Is that something we should be concerned about as far as, the shifts in the retail market?
Yes, let me when Orchard first came online, I think it was very much under restauranted. In other words, the square footage devoted to restaurants was far less than what the potential would have dictated otherwise. So most developers might have put in quite a bit more dining. What you're seeing is what you saw or seeing is an adjustment from the natural shift in the last couple of years. There's a lot of tenants. If a site's not an A 100% site, and Orchard was always like a B+ site. It was never like the strongest site in the world. You're going to see some of the tenants turn over. Now, turnover in retail tenants, it's like, it's the one constant in retail is turnover, both retail and dining. It's the one thing you can always count on, is that somebody's going to fall in love with the center. They're going to think they have the right concept. They're going to come into the center, and for whatever reason, they don't do as well. So I'm not going to key in on any particular tenants at the Orchard, but what you're seeing there is kind of the natural progression that we see in an awful lot of centers and districts throughout the United States. That transition, and the fact that like I mentioned earlier, that restaurants really are the de facto anchor in many districts and centers that really contribute to not only the frequency of visits, but the extent of the trade area. So what we've done, and that in addition to the potential for a specialty grocer, which I don't think I even mentioned, we came up with pretty good potential for a specialty grocer in downtown. But looking at each of the major categories that are potentially available for downtown, we've done a dining study that pretty much, I think, pretty well predicts how much dining could come online. We still have a long way to go. The wild card at some point in the future is going to be, what type of specialty retail can we get? And so you have the ability in the downtown plan to adjust. So in terms of restaurants, I think one thing you were asking about is the infrastructure. And I'm assuming you're also talking about, so when you do a mixed use building, you have to identify fairly early on where the dining is going to be, because they require exhaust chases that go up to the roof unless they can exhaust out the building. So those, we've gone through the use matrix and further subdivided some of the blocks into corners so that we can recommend that, you know, as long as we can hold to the potential restaurants at these different locations within downtown, I think we're going to be good for the long term. I hope that
Great.
wasn't too long-winded.
No, it hits on some of the points I was curious about. Some other quick things that I'm curious about, and this is again around trends and how we've seen some stuff change. And I think some of this is probably unknown, but I'd still be interested to get your expertise on it, knowing that you've done what you do for a long time. So two areas that have raised concern for me recently with this kind of dense building, such as the downtown. You know, nationally, we've seen a shift in rise in crime, unfortunately, and hopefully that's, you know, a temporary thing. But between crime and COVID, are we seeing that impact some of this more dense type living? I know I attended a meeting with the apartments over there, the Cent, that was concerned about like auto thefts and stuff out of those parking garages. And, you know, I've heard some national stories, read different articles about, you know, some of that more dense living that's gotten really popular over time, that maybe COVID has made some sort of shift with people wanting to be naturally more separated because of the impacts of COVID. So I'm just curious, between those two things, that we've seen both of those shifts in the national market, like what has that done to these kind of markets, and how long do we, or are you thinking that those impacts might last, and are those things that we should be planning for long term?
I think the areas that have been really impacted by COVID, and you know, there's any number of different opinions on how very dense areas like New York City or Chicago, I mean, or even downtown Denver, how they're going to be viewed going forward by, you know, the younger workers. And, you know, there was some people are predicting a shift out to more suburban locations for offices because they can air out. But what you're creating in downtown Westminster really is kind of the best of both worlds. So you have some density, but it's largely centered outside. So unlike, you know, you have a lot of all your uses are outside or accessed from outside. I think that's good. From a crime standpoint, your question on crime, I think anytime you're in a very dense situation, you have the potential for more crime. I don't see that as a potential problem for downtown, at least looking at it through my filter right now. I think that's all, and it's from that's really a management opportunity. As you manage the security of downtown. You know, I don't see it as looming on the horizon as a huge concern.
Great. And you kind of hit my other question. You brought up the fact we are still targeting a grocer, and I know that's something I've heard about since 3 years I've been on council. So I'm glad that that's still on the list of things that we realize would benefit. So I appreciate your time tonight and the presentation. Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair.
I apologize for skipping over my bullet point on the grocery, but the grocery demand is strong. It's just a matter of getting the right operator in early on.
Ms. Smith?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's helpful to get an update of where we're at with downtown. There are a couple questions that came from the presentation. And I know that this is kind of hard to analyze at this point as we're shifting into more of a post-pandemic and the lessons learned within the last year.
Lindsay, it appears you froze up. Ms. Parker, can you text Ms. Smith and let her know that she froze up on her internet?
I certainly will, Mayor, or Mr. Chair.
So let's pause for just a minute, see if we can get her back.
Mr. Chair, Board Member Smith indicated that she just briefly has lost an internet connection. She's going to attempt to reconnect at this time.
All right, we'll give her another minute, see how long it takes. Mr. Bowles, we'll come to you next.
Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can, Greg.
Okay, I somehow lost my picture and all that.
We can see you and we can hear you.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chair and WEEDA board members, Councillor Smith has advised me that she's lost internet and she's rebooting, but would like to call in the meantime. So if you could just bear with her for 1 second, she's going to attempt to call in.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, as we're waiting anyways, would it be possible to take a brief bio?
Why don't you go ahead and we'll try to take a bio until 7:25. Give everybody about 8 minutes. So 7:25 we'll come back. Ms. Parker, can you let her know we're going to take a short break while we're working with her?
I will do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Michelle, this is Counselor Smith. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Wake up, Mayor. Oh.
Just thought they were reading glasses.
Yes. Yeah, were you about to sneeze?
I think every child in my house is on a device, and I don't want to have the same issues that Counselor Smith is, or I'm sorry, Board Member Smith is having. So I'm trying to get them to get off the internet.
Good luck with that.
That's considered cruel and unusual punishment.
Right? I don't cook on Monday nights, and they can't use the internet. It's
Mommy dearest.
Got to increase your bandwidth.
How do you do that?
Call the company, say more power, Scotty.
Okay.
I think I'm on like a first name basis with everybody at CenturyLink. It's not helping, so I need to, I guess, be more convincing or something.
Okay. All right, Ms. Smith, do we have you back?
I hope.
Okay.
All right.
Greg, are you still around? Let me get Greg there. Can you get Greg back on the line, Jody? There he is. All right. All right, Ms. Smith, let's try again.
Perfect. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so post-pandemic, getting into looking at office space. I know that in your bullet point, you mentioned that office use will help the site. What are your thoughts if there's a shifting trend as far as less office space, more at work, work from home space? What does that look like as far as downtown and our plans for office use in this area?
Let me make sure I understand, because I think Mary Beth might want to chime in on this as well. You're asking less office space versus more?
With our current trends moving forward with what we have for office space, is there a concern that there might be vacant space that we won't be able to fill? Moving into more people maybe staying at home and working?
I'll let Mary Beth answer that. I don't think it's a concern, because you don't have, like, the overwhelming capacity in the market area. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Everything's a bit unknown, but I will say the office developer, one of the things that we're seeing is new office spaces leasing. We've just finished working on the McGregor Square project, and that building's 100% leased. And it was leased because during the pandemic, primarily because offices are coming up with a new way to want their space built out, from air ventilation, open systems. So actually new office spaces I think are going to be okay. I think it's how much can you put on the market at once. And the developer that we're working with has, I think, a really good handle on that. So, and the first building is about 200,000 feet. So I think we're fine with that. I will say, I think there are going to be some corporate users wanting to leave their existing spaces, because there is still a corporate culture that people want. They may not be there 5 days a week, maybe less space, but they're coming back slowly. And so the good news is we've got a little bit of time to respond to that. But I will say, in downtown, the 2 buildings that are leasing are the brand new ones. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yes. And Mr. Mayor or Chair Member Atchison, I lost internet again, but I'm on with my phone. So
Go ahead.
if I can continue participating this way, that would be helpful. Thank you for that answer. That's very helpful on your thoughts on that. And then my final question is, there was a bullet point with, I don't have it in front of me anymore, but national tenants versus local retail. And I think I read that or understood in the bullet point that a national tenant is more valuable than a local retail.
I must have internet
again.
So sorry.
Should I answer that now?
Yeah, go ahead if you can, Greg.
Okay. Every viable project that really wants to assert itself in a unique way has a combination of national and local regional tenants. The national tenants, early on, when I said the site could have national tenants early on, it would have required a completely different layout and really underutilizing the land in comparison to what you've got in the vision right now. National tenants have certain site requirements, certain criteria in terms of visibility, parking, et cetera, that make getting them early on in the project rather difficult. But once a project is viable from a local and local regional standpoint, then the site becomes much more valuable. So in the acceptable use matrix, for the early on blocks, we consciously tried to encourage the more unique local retailers so that the site would stand out from the very beginning and not get, not start to look like every other project you've ever been to in the Denver area. But we do envision at some point, because there's no controls, there's very few controls on the individual developers once they get through the initial development on whether they have to stick with regionals or not.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Mr. Voles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be really brief. I also, I should say thank you for this update on our downtown. It's exciting to see progress being made and the retail restaurants moving in. And I also drive through there regularly, kind of check on it, and there's a lot of progress there. So I feel good about that, and it does feel good. We recently lost our REI up in the Orchard. I understand it wasn't so much the market as it was a lease issue with the landlord there. Is that specialty retail that could be attracted to the new downtown? I had a lot of residents be very disappointed, and myself included, when REI didn't left the Orchard. And it's kind of a destination place. I know we have young and active people in this particular community downtown, and it sounds like it. I didn't realize it, but their income is relatively high, or matches the area. Is that something we would look at specialty retail to bring into our new downtown? And that's it for me. And again, thanks for the update.
I think it's something, we looked at that. The spacing is not ideal for REI, and I've worked with REI, or the potential for REI, on a couple of other projects, and they really look at, that heat map that I showed you, they understand exactly where they're drawing customers and what their overlap is with different stores. So anytime you engage with a retailer of the quality of REI, you have one storyline and they're looking at their hard data. So the proximity to downtown could be an issue, but I would definitely say it's worthy of discussion.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to just chime in really quick. The way to achieve, if we can't get an REI, there are outdoor sporting good, smaller stores that, as Greg said, that's the next natural progression of the leasing. Once the dining is in, that group then comes in. So a bike store, an outdoor store is very likely. And one of the things that Mark Shaker brings, it's amazing, is there are retail tenants that want to be near him, not necessarily food tenants, retail tenants that he's started to give us a list of. So I'm really hopeful that within that Aspire building and going up into the Westminster Row building, you'll start to see more of that retail. So honestly, it's a better way to do it, because as you can see, when a big REI goes out, you're left with a box. If a bike store goes out, you can refill it pretty quickly. So actually the paradigm of this retail leasing is more stable long-term. It's just, it takes a little longer to have the impact than one big store opening at once. So thank you for letting me give you a little more input.
Well, thank you for those answers, and thanks for answering all of our questions tonight. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, members of the board, does anyone else have any questions of the group before we finish this one up? Going back to Councilor DeMott's earlier question in regards to the Orchard, I think we all saw that coming into the point of retail is changing. There's a big move away, not seeing a lot of the centers like ourselves opening up, having big box stores. They demand too much square footage. As Greg said, they have a lot of specific demands. They want excessive amounts of parking, kind of like a King Superstore. But we saw the shift, and from my last contact with Vestar, who is the owner of the Orchard, all of those big box stores that were up there have been released, including the REI store. So they are all under contract to be backfilled, but there's not going to be anything in there that's going to be big box. They're subdividing some of those square footages. There's large banking headquarters coming in up there. So the change that we're seeing in those markets, as Greg and Mary Beth are very well in tune with, is the big box store is going into the pad sites. and they're smaller in square footage because we're seeing more retail sales online than we did in the big stores. But the demand for that square footage, as Greg pointed out, restaurants bring people in to eat. Rooftops drive retail. If you don't have that mix to drive the rooftops, you don't have the retail. And the mix of, to John's point, what's that mix going to be? You don't want all of anything, but you do want some things that allow people to have ownership, to have investment in the place. They want that downtown feel, but you also want the rental because there's people who just don't want to own homes. Mr. DeMott, you had a follow-up.
I did, and I appreciate the information that you shared. Totally understand what you're saying. I guess one of the things that kind of struck me in the presentation was the heat map. And so, I mean, it struck me, but at the same time, it's not really surprising because, I mean, that was a retail center before. So, I mean, we're seeing pretty high demand or reach for that area, even without the extra rooftops today, according to that heat map, because those are folks that, if I understood that heat map right, are people who have visited the J.C. Penney Center or something close by and then spread back out. So we think that center, rooftop or not, should be able to pull, like it did as a mall, strong retail. Would that be a correct summary?
Yes, you did read the heat map correctly. It's everybody who's within the confines of the building the past 6 months, not just in the nearby area. And so it does draw on the site, it does draw from a wide area. We also, subsequently to that map, did the same heat maps for a variety of grocery stores located in Westminster as part of the grocery analysis. And that also shows local grocery stores the ability to draw from a wider area than you would typically think. So when I see a trade area like that, I think, there's a lot of uses that have potential for the site. I think that by virtue of design on the downtown to date, you've created a variety of spaces that are not overly large and that are therefore more releasable over time going forward than somebody who would have put a 30,000 foot big box use in.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, seeing no other comments, if there's nothing else from staff. Jody, you got anything else?
No, sir. Just want to thank the board for its leadership and support over the years, and we will continue to provide updates to you. And just wanted to acknowledge and thank you for your questions tonight. Very good discussion. Thank you.
All right, we'll move on next to the city council items. So we will adjourn now as the Westminster Economic Development Authority, and we will move on to the reports for our city council under the study session. Councilor Sykes. Mayor Pro Tem.
Not a problem, Mayor. I was just going to try to get in with a quick question, but it's not relevant. It wasn't pressing, so I can ask at a later date. I'll just send an email follow-up. So.
Do you have any reports you want to make?
Yeah, let me go through this last week. On Friday of last week, I had our CC4CA meeting, board meeting. Unfortunately, I could not stay on for the full board meeting, and I do not believe the staff liaison was on. I was fortunate enough to get my COVID vaccination on Friday, so please, I hope you'll forgive me, but I didn't want to miss that open slot. They were going over the different legislation that they're following this year that is on the House. Their bill was heard today, and I believe it passed with some amendments, and that is the hazard mitigation bill. And so just kind of got an update on that. Obviously, a lot of the members are in Boulder County, or there's City of Boulder was also present. So we did spend the first part of the meeting just making sure everybody was okay after the horrific shooting there. But that is my last week. So don't have anything else to report. Hope everyone's well.
Councilor Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just wanted to thank Mr. Mayor and the City of Westminster and Front Range Community College for their work on bringing the vaccines to that location. I do believe that they're also working on getting vaccines to our other testing sites, so thank you. I was able to get my vaccine, my first one, and my husband was as well. I also want to thank all the residents. I had several residents who were trying to help me find vaccines last week, and I really appreciate all that work. It's nice to have such a very caring community, and I felt very, very humbled, so thank you. Also, I would like to, I didn't have any meetings last week, but I do have a few coming up this week. On Thursday night, we have the Parks, Recreation, Library, Open Space Board meeting. I would invite people to attend that meeting. To the public, these are open to everyone, and this is a great way to be involved in the city and what's going on and know what's happening in our community. So please plan to join us on Thursday night. And then on Monday morning, we have our Rocky Mountain Metropolitan Airport Roundtable. And I've heard from quite a few residents who are experiencing noise concerns with the airport, as well as pollution concerns. So please join us for that roundtable and listen in. We've spent a lot of time trying to get situated and settled, but and we're still doing a lot of learning right now. It is moving kind of slow, but I really would encourage the public to attend that roundtable. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Seymour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This last week, I had the opportunity to attend the Westminster Community Service Network. Councilor Scully was also participating in that. It's moderated by Lauren Warner, who is the president chair of the Westminster Legacy Foundation. It's a outstanding group of local nonprofits that meet and share what they have going on and to help each other out. So it's a great opportunity to hear what's going on in our community. Always appreciate that Kate Scarbeck is our representative from the city of Westminster that participates in that. So adds a great deal to that. One announcement that came out of there, a fundraising opportunity from Growing Home. It is a virtual food challenge where you can enter. They're encouraging the young chefs out there to enter, and then also hoping to those that have a large draw in the community, they can set up a fundraising site. And since it's virtual, no one's going to get sick from what I cook, so you can just watch it. As long as it looks good, it could win, right? So that's another opportunity. You go to growinghome.org and find out information on that. Also, special permits and licensing had a meeting this week, and it was a rather lengthy one. So I want to thank those residents that participate on our special permits and licensing board. And they are looking again in our second meeting of the month, very lengthy agenda. And once again, proving that businesses want to get licenses here, and we have special events coming. So we'll look forward to those as we get into that meeting later in the week. And then announcement for a couple other nonprofits. Tomorrow night is going to be a great evening virtually. The Westminster 710 Rotary, along with CASA of the 17th Judicial, is having their roast that was delayed from last year. And we've got one of Westminster's favorite sons, Frank DeAngelis, will be the roastee this year. And someone asked me, how do you roast Frank DeAngelis? He is just an amazing individual. Well, I think former Sheriff Ted Mink has some stories to tell, and former Westminster High School principal Chris Dittman has a few things that he's going to add to that. So it's going to be an entertaining evening. The pre-roast starts at 5:30. You can go to westminster710rotary.com and find the links. Bidding for the silent auction open items are up. We've got a couple great hosts for this. Greg Moss and Reggie Rivers will be the presenters for that part, so that'll be entertaining in itself. And the money that's raised for this helps CASA of the 17th Judicial with their training, court-appointed special advocates that our own Counselor Smith is a CASA, volunteers help them train and help appoint youth or to help young people who need someone to speak for them when there's adults that cannot. And also the great projects that the Westminster 710 Rotary does throughout the year in the community. So I encourage everyone to tune in at 5:30, and the roast starts at 6. And that's all for me tonight. Thank you very much.
Counselor Volt.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple meetings last week. I'll report on those. On Thursday, the Adams County Regional Economic Partnership met. We reviewed our goals for the year. The board of directors reviewed our goals for the year. Those are on the website, so I won't go through them, but they're actually quite impressive. So I would encourage my colleagues, go take a look at their website. It's a really good group of great people. I'm impressed with what we're going to try to accomplish this year here in Adams County. And then they also reviewed their legislation. We're in the middle of a legislative session. They're tracking, believe it or not, 34 bills. So they're quite busy. Again, they have a bill tracker on their website, so you can see it's a lot of different bills on a lot of different subjects, obviously, because it's the whole county. So everything from airport, issues with airport, economic development, housing, they're involved in a lot. So check out the website again. I won't go through all those. It's a lot of bills. And then I also on Wednesday had Environmental Advisory Board meeting. And we had a really good meeting. They're moving forward and they're actually doing a lot of good work with how we can work with HOAs to encourage sustainability and provide them with resources. To that effort, they had Chris Marion, who works for CAP Management. He had done some work and a report on how we can reach out to HOAs and assist them in being more sustainable environmentally, but also financially. So the EAB is more involved with the environmental part of it, but it was a great meeting and there were a lot of good ideas. So that was discussed, good meeting. I think the group was pleased with the progress we're making. Also, Solar United Neighbors, there was a brief report on that and they've exceeded their goal already. So they far exceeded their goal, so that's a good sign. So Paul Schmeek, our Environmental Sustainability Officer, is going to report back on what the next steps are on that. So I'll let you know on that as well. So I thought that was a good sign. And then they also organized a great global cleanup for Little Dry Creek there at the RTD station. They've done that a few years. I know Mayor Pro Tem Sites, I think you were there a couple years ago. They're going back to that site for their cleanup this year. That's on Sunday, April 25th. So they've got a lot of good things going on. So I just wanted to report on that. Thank you. That's it.
Counselor Demott.
Thank you, Mayor. Hopefully everybody got to enjoy their family this past weekend for Easter, which was a beautiful day. So was glad to see that this weekend. The one thing I wanted to hit on that I attended was a meeting with Senator Winter and Senator Lee. Were gracious enough to host a question answer session around SB 2162. I think it was a good opportunity for us and some of our leadership and police to address concerns we have with that bill. I still have a lot of concerns with that bill. I still think that it's bad for safety in the community, and I really encourage people to learn what you can about it. I certainly learned some things about it I didn't know, but I still would hold the fact that I think it's going to be bad for the community, but I do appreciate them giving the opportunity to hear us out. But if you're as concerned as I am, I would encourage you to reach out to your representatives in the city. We have Senator Byrd, or Senator Winter, Representative Byrd, Representative Dartrey, and as well as Senator Zenzinger. So I would encourage you to reach out to them and ask them about that bill, as well as SB 21182, which has to do with school resource officers. Those were the only things I wanted to share tonight. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to follow up on what Councilor Demott just said, and don't forget Senator Moreno as well, Councilor Demott. We had multiple members of council. In fact, most of council were on that call, and it was a good opportunity for those who'd be implementing the changes and trying to keep our community safe, to express, not just to ask questions, but actually to express their concerns. There were a whole list of questions that were in the chat that we were told we would get answers to. I didn't know if those maybe were directed to the city. Have those become available yet, or should I reach back out to either Senator Winter or Senator Lee to see if those are forthcoming? Does anyone from staff, did anyone receive those?
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll check on that. As I think council knows, we're generating our own comments that we'll provide you when those are available, but I don't know that they're going to include getting answers to those questions, but we'll follow back and see what their plan is to provide responses to the attendees.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there was, I believe they said they were capturing everything that was in the chat, and it was things as simple as definition of VRA crimes and definition of flight risk. I think there was a lot of us that are outside of the criminal justice system that wanted to make sure we were all talking with the same level of information. So that would be incredibly helpful. So thank you very much for your efforts.
Councilor DeMott, to your point, Metro mayors last Thursday issued a letter of a strong opposed to Senate Bill 62. We are working on a piece for 182. I did talk to Representative Byrd this morning, and I believe that she will be for the way that it is currently written, at least, that could change depending upon amendments, that she right now is also an opposed. But I talked to her about 7:30 this morning about it. So I believe she's also going to come out with an opposed position of 182, which is the school resource officers. But I'll leave that to her because I think she's still waiting to see what, if any, amendments come in. But right now, I believe she will support the same position the city does.
Thank you for your leadership on opposing those, Mayor.
All right, let's move on to city manager's report. Mr. Tripp.
Just very briefly in terms of calendar, this weekend, the mayor pro tem, and councilors will be conducting a strategic plan workshop from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday and 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday. They will be attending in person, but the public is able to view that virtually through our normal networks. A week from tonight will be the first city council meeting that will be held back in the council chambers. For those that are able to attend in terms of council, it continues to be a virtual process for the public. I know council members are anxious to bring you back in as soon as we can, and we'll continue to work that and monitor progress of vaccinations, et cetera, in the Front Range. But just a reminder to everyone that the meetings will continue to be virtually broadcast, and council has asked staff to look at the long-term value of what we've learned in the technology and the process of having these accessible long-term. So we're working on that. And thank you, council. We'll after tonight's meeting, we'll see you at 8 a.m. on Saturday morning.
All right, Mr. Tripp, let's move on to the COVID response, and then we'll wrap up with the comp plan overview. You're muted, Mr. Tripp.
We'll go to Max Kirschbaum, please.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. This evening, maybe a few things beyond the numbers that I think you might find interesting. Next slide, please. So what you see on the slide is primarily the arrows heading in the wrong direction. Notably, I would say that positivity rate, which had been hanging around in the mid 3s to mid 4s, is now in the mid 4s to mid 5s area. That could be attributed to numbers of testing, which has been going down as the number of vaccinations has been going up. So there probably is a correlation in that data. If you just kind of focus on these numbers, and especially the new cases for Adams and Jefferson County as they were on Friday, April 2nd, It's interesting that Jefferson is still overall in the blue, but now approaching 130. If you look at today's data on that, Jefferson County is even a little bit higher. It's now at 131, so continuing to climb. Adams County is now at 143. Hospitalization rate, I'll point out here and then speak to it a little bit again on the next slide, but here at 376, and then as of today, it is now over 400. It's at 401. If I could go to the next slide, please. And you'll see what I had thought I was going to say this evening is that this number has been pretty steady since about March 15th, which is still more or less true. But when I saw the number as of the close of business today at 401, I'm going to say it a little bit differently. At 401, the last time this number was as high as 400 was March 1st. So we've been on the decline through that period, and now we're headed back up. I noticed on this evening's national news also that the CDC estimates that a third of all of the new cases is nationwide anyway, is attributed to the 117 UK variant of the original virus. So that's probably accurate for us as well. If we go on to the next slide and look at vaccinations, these numbers continue to look encouraging. It's about 2.8 million that have been vaccinations administered, and over 1.1 million people in the state who are now fully vaccinated. That would be about 20% of the population of the state. If you factor out, and I'm going to estimate a number, but if you factor out those under 16, that number vaccinated among the population eligible to be vaccinated is certainly higher than 20%. Maybe it's 30%, but making good progress. The number of doses appears to be at or above 400,000 received by the state per week. That's a big change. And at this rate, it won't take many more weeks for everybody to at least have that first shot who desires the shot. And with that, that's all I have for this evening.
Max, before I go to the question from Councilor Seymour, I will let you know that we've just received during the break official notification from the state that they are putting Jefferson County in yellow effective Wednesday. And since Adams County is still in yellow, they won't probably move me again for a while.
Yeah, if I could maybe add to that, I didn't know that. That's not a surprise. I looked at the numbers for all of the metro counties, and they're actually all moving in that upward direction in the metro area. There aren't any that I looked at that are on their way down. They're all moving upward, and most are in fact at yellow.
And we have two counties now that have been put back in orange. That's Summit and Pitkin County. They've been put in orange by the state. Councilor Seymour, you had a comment or a question?
One question, Mr. Kirschbaum, is there any way to determine actual COVID hospitalizations by the metro area instead of just the statewide, or is it just something that's not that specific?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. Take a look to see how much that is broken down. I normally just look at the one number, which is a statewide number, but sure, I will take a look for that.
Yeah, only if it's readily available. I know that from a county by county basis, it's tough because people go to the hospital where they're a member or their health, cross county lines. So I understand that. Also, too, I wanted to note that today Jefferson County made the announcement public that you no longer need to wear a mask outside when, just that comment on that, and I'll leave it at that.
Other comments on the COVID update from anyone? Mr. Frankel, did you have anything you were adding?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I wanted to provide the monthly emergency declaration update for your benefit, as this is the first meeting of April. Dining for local restaurants and expediting their applications that remains on the books. We also have testing in place for safety sensitive employees of the city. Obviously, we're also collaborating with COVID testing sites and now vaccination sites for our residents. Wanted to bring to your attention the third-party restaurant delivery fee cap was in place until March 31st. It is no longer in effect now. Hopefully with the warmer weather, restaurants will be able to conduct business and not feel the same impact as far as the delivery fees that they had been alerting us to. We're continuing to track eligible expenditures. And the EOC status, I'm advised, is partial action as required. Also, to update City Council with regard to our local mask regulation, which was on May 11th of last year. And as you'll recall, Resolution 17A requested that residents of the city wear face coverings when they are within businesses and government facilities in Westminster, and as well as outdoors when they're unable to socially distance. The recent changes that Councilor Seymour just brought up include Jefferson County's Public Health Department today amending their face covering order to take out the outdoor mask wearing requirement. And the state of Colorado, the executive order from Governor Polis was amended on Saturday, April 2nd. And the state's amendment also now addresses something for what I believe is the first time, and it's a threshold which talks about the levels at which face coverings can be lifted, requirement can be lifted. And I think the state has described this as somewhat a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's currently set at 35 cases per 100,000 or less. So if a county is able to have numbers below 35, they have now an option. But those that are at levels of 35 per 100,000 or more have continued mandates in place from the state regarding face coverings in public indoor spaces. And there's obviously that includes not only government facilities, but employment centers and businesses as well. And it does require that owners of the businesses post those signage to that effect at their entryway, that anyone entering things would be required to wear a face covering. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that the orders are evolving around us, and Adams County through the Tri-County Health Department has not yet changed its face covering order. So it does remain in effect when I last checked their website earlier this afternoon to mandate in public indoor spaces as well as outdoors where social distancing isn't possible. So I wanted to bring that to your attention and evolve. We re-examine the state or the city's resolution, which as you'll recall, was encouraging voluntary compliance and sought cooperation from our residents as to the wearing of face coverings. I would differentiate that slightly from the health department and the state orders, which actually have civil and criminal penalties associated with them. But so that you're aware, the city's resolution remains in effect at this time. And my recommendation would be that we monitor the local orders that are coming out of Tri-County as to inform next steps for our order. So if you have any questions, I'm glad to take them.
Councilor Demott.
No question, just thank you for this. I know I brought this up last week and I would appreciate continue to monitor it because I still think that at some point it makes sense, in my opinion, to drop the city one as we follow guidance from above as it is. So I appreciate you continuing to keep an eye on it.
And as Mr. and people eligible as of April the 2nd, but still has to ask. When I met with the 2 local public health departments last week, I asked them again that if the local control is provided from the state, looking at restaurants in specific, would they consider reducing? I have agreement from both that they will consider it, but they did not either one to it. So we may still see once it releases that down to the county. The other problem we're going to have to continue to watch is that we don't get conflicting orders out of the 2 counties if control comes down to them. Any questions on COVID? Okay. Next item. One thing before we go into the next item, anybody in here baseball fans? If not, if you do happen to be, Major League Baseball just announced Coors Field will be hosting the All-Star game. Georgia, we appreciate it. Okay, if we could go ahead and slide down from the, and Mr. Tripp, who do you have presenting for us now?
Yes.
Done on this, and I know it's been a huge team, multiple departments and many people, but appreciate it. I want to acknowledge that this evening. Thank you.
Andrew.
It is 12. Probably speaking is about 15 minutes.
I was going to go ahead and do a bio break, but if it's that short, I think we'll be able to make it. So.
Thank you for the introduction. Good evening, Mayor Atchison. I'm Spurgeon, long-range planner in community, and I will be leading this presentation. We did consultants that help with different portions of the work, but our consultants. And by thanking you for this opportunity to introduce you to the plan, how to find things in it as you spend time over it in the coming months. Some of what you'll see here is similar to what we reviewed in our November 23rd presentation, but we are now in a position to have a full draft available for City Council and the general public to spend some time on to review the document. We did get hard copies delivered to each of you. I hope you all received those. Hopefully that will facilitate your document. Tonight's presentation will grant you to the organization of the plan as you review it, identify some key themes, and finally identify a timeline to receive additional feedback on the plan from the community, and at a later time, a study session with to refine the plan prior to. Next slide, please. As the city council spends time reviewing the draft over the coming months, I want to identify takeaways for you since I realize the overall size plan is daunting. The draft plan resolves parties identified in stakeholder interviews, including city councilors, as well as in-person and online community engagement. This is the community who were able to complete the activity during the pandemic. Like the sustainability plan, the comprehensive plan is a high-level policy document organized forward themes to support alignment. Year 24 on neighborhoods and character types are mapped in the land use diagram and function as one policy within the overall framework of the plan. With our water supply for fiscal impacts at a city scale. As the comprehensive plan was developed, a sustainability plan strategy recognizes the sustainability and resiliency of existing neighborhoods becomes a more central focus for the city as we near build out. In 2018, the city launched Westminster Forward, the coordinated community engagement process for a comprehensive plan, restoration and libraries plan, sustainability plan, water supply plan, and a companion comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan focuses on the 6 themes in the green box: economic resilience, housing and neighborhoods, land use and development, health and wellness, transportation, transportation and mobility plan, and parks recreation. Since 2013, which is when we adopted our existing comprehensive plan, evolving in employment and retail trends, which I'll touch on during the WEEDA discussion. The plan will the effects of slowing population growth, which is less than 1% a year since 2010. Sizes. The plan will access to employment and residential technologies change how and where residents live and work, including the plan will aging demographics, including the more over age Latinx and Asian communities, with 22% of the city's residents now identifying. Commission and City Council. There was a preference for with proximity to amenities such as parks. The need to adapt retail areas to change. Next slide, please.
Who's on the IT tonight? Having people on the outside are having hearing problems with the audio, but also he's also receiving messages that the net add less people.
Could you answer that question?
I'm locked in now.
Trying to start it.
Matt, would it help be more?
The network and everything.
Link or her location.
You know, do is if you want to take just maybe 5 and restart the computer that it's hosted on and just restart the stream and see if that helps.
All right, let's try to do. We're getting it.
Yeah, give me just a couple minutes. I'll let you know when it's back up.
All right, please. For those